Star Citizen is a crowd-funded game, but it still has private investors to the tune of over £70 million. Those investors could at this very moment begin extracting up to £71 million in their owed cash from CIG, and have until September 30th to do so. If they don't do that, the next opportunity is going to be in 2029, and they aren't doing anything. In fact, they invested more into the project in 2025. Now, I've spent weeks digging into Star Citizen's financial documents and their 2024 report with the UK government, and I sat down with the vice president of CMBS and RE Finance to better explain to you the financial situation Star Citizen is in. Because more than the new ships, the marketing push, or the pay cuts directors have been taking, the answer to why Star Citizen's biggest investors are hanging on for the long run is the community. Thank you for coming to my Tomato Talk. I started covering this a few weeks ago when I stumbled on CIG's financial information. These pages are released 1 year after the effective date, so while I did just tell you about the movement of funds from Squadron 42 over to Star Citizen in 2023 in the last video in this series, we're looking at 2024 today, which tells a different story. I'll be including excerpts from the recent podcast episode with Citizen Skylark, whose day job is evaluating corporate debt structures, investment risk, and whether financial instruments are worth holding or selling. So basically what investors do with their money. If you want to see the whole podcast, that's available over on Space Tomato 2. The biggest misconception about Star Citizen is that it's sitting on a massive cash pile of almost $1 billion. It's not. At the end of 2024, they had about £5 million in the bank. They run lean, paying almost 900 employees in a few different studios across the UK, US, Germany, and Canada. While the cash pile is small, they have proven to be profitable when accounting for various tax benefits. But the real story here is a put option made by the primary private investors in Star Citizen. I briefly covered in the previous episode that this is presumed to be the Calder family. While we will get to the details of what this put option means, the numbers from PricewaterhouseCoopers are anywhere from 34.2 to 71.4 million pounds. This means CIG faces a liability of up to 71.4 million pounds in the form of their main private investors' due. PwC listed this as a qualified liability, but CIG in 2024 actually disagreed with them on that and did not list it. On top of this, the wages at CIG in 2024 were actually exceeding their revenue, leading to more reliance on that tax credit that I mentioned from the UK, possibly a key variable in moving everybody to Manchester over time. Along with a pretty big pay cut to the upper staff in the company that year, it's clear there were expectations in where things would go for CIG, and the company was shifting to make guarantees. But the most surprising part of this possible cash influx for the investor is that the window to exercise this put started back in January of 2026 this year and ends on September 30th. Now, to be clear, when I originally covered this topic, I was seeing these dates. I wasn't entirely sure of what was going on, and I made that clear. While I was worried, I did have some people show up in the comments to make some suggestions. One was Citizen Skylark, who gave some insight, and the community demanded he get on the camera. What he told me changed my opinion about the report. Let's start with that put option I mentioned. The context of it dates back to 2018, when the Calders invested their first $46 million into the project for 10% stake. At the time, Squadron 42 had just been delayed in 2016. Star Citizen 3.0 struggled to release and led to a year-long drought of no updates in 2017. And the general direction of the project was still quite up in the air. So, what exactly did this put option mean to Star Citizen? How might it affect the game if investors did decide to pull out at this time, now that we're 8 years later? And so they took on this investment from the Calders, who have since doubled down several times, but at that time, you would say they were in more risk?
Totally, 100%. Because they're from what I know, right? You don't have a solid release date for Squadron, obviously, because it's 2016. It's essentially coming out this year. You don't know that in 2018. The PU is a dumpster fire. Star Engine wasn't even really a thing back, like a full force thing, right?
No.
So you don't even have that as a backup, right? Like I could, as CIG, even if the other two things didn't work, well, let me just finish Star Engine or sell it off to like Rockstar or someone for billions of dollars and call it a day, because it's a great engine at the end of the day. What they're building is technically very impressive. So you could sell that as an asset. But in 2018, you don't have any those three things. You don't have any of them.
Right.
So you are in a very tough spot. This is a corporate put option. So essentially what PwC is talking about here is an investor invested $10 million with CIG, but there's trigger periods, as we will go over. And inside those periods, I can exercise those options as XYZ happens. And so that's what this case is.
What is the put option worth?
But in 2024, I believe their first put option period would be valued at around 34.2 million euros. That would be significantly more now. Now, the important thing with the put option and why this isn't, I'll get to your original question, but to kind of quell the masses and to put water on the flame is even if he does, or the investor does decide to take the put option, they would only get paid out your cash surplus at the end of the year.
So the company would be able to operate basically and keep making money to pay.
Yes. Correct. That's why, in my opinion, it's not that big of a deal. That one of the reasons. There's multiple other reasons which we will go over, but for me right there, that's not a big deal.
That point that even if this put option was exercised right now, the money extracted from the project would come from excess cash is key. Because on the outside, we really couldn't know if that has been exercised or not. So we are making a big assumption here that they haven't pulled the money out. I can't say what might change if it were to happen, if it's really just going to be coming from additional profit anyways. But there's still more context to understand here. CIG in their 2024 financial reports, like I said, actually didn't list this as a liability. But from what Citizen Skylike had to say, there is reason for this. Why maliciously would you not put it down as a liability?
It's not malicious. There's nothing malicious here.
Okay.
Completely nothing malicious. PwC even says it themselves. Them choosing not to put it on there is valid in their opinion because, and I would even argue that I wouldn't even put it as a liability either, because their trigger period wasn't until we're now 2 years later in January 2026, January this year was their first trigger period. So it wasn't even technically a liability in 2024.
Now that trigger period ends on the 30th of September 2026. And I do wonder if that date's going to end up being significant. Not that something happens on that date, but if they need to do anything before that date, just like, to make sure the investors are cool.
Yeah. I mean, even PwC themselves say it in here that now this is the company, CIG, telling PwC this, but they quote that they, based upon previous representations from the holders and given the company's financial position, budgets, and forecast, the company currently assesses the probability of the holders exercising their put rights to be remote, not very remote. Let me be precise. To be remote.
So at this point, it's a disagreement on the importance of the timeline between private company and their elected government auditor. Clearly, CIG understands what their future finances will look like better than PwC or the UK government, but it does still need to be called out. Companies can obviously set things up to look less risky than they are, but as we'll soon see, that may have paid off. But at this time, still quite the risk, with only £5 million in the bank and a slow but steady revenue stream that was still being outpaced by expenses. That is a risk. One that we are now looking back on from here in mid-2026, but now with a lot more context. And that's where we are now. Squadron 42 has indeed siphoned funds from Star Citizen, as we talked about, but that 2026 release date for Squadron may very well be the reason they are waiting to see. That release date and the strategy for 2025 may be more surgical than you think, both guaranteeing a Squadron 42 release by 2026 by pushing devs to bolster that game's launch, but that strategy also generated the most annual Star Citizen ship sales in the company's history. I ask you this. Would you divest after seeing this? I think CIG met their goal last year, and I think investors were expecting it and more, as they signed yet another £10 million into the project as of March of 2025, only doubling down on the Star Citizen project. I was genuinely confused by this originally without context and made sure to ask about this during my interview.
But as an investor, why would I exercise in this trigger period? If, for a fact, we all know, record year last year, it's going very good for the first half of this year, almost for the first half of this year. And big ships are coming at Invictus. Yep. Then you have Squadron coming out this year. My shares will be worth probably more in that. I'm guessing as the investor. I'm doing this math in my head. I'm going, well, my shares are probably going to be a lot worth a lot more than if I just took the cash right now. If you bring up that funding chart that you had on earlier, I do have essentially maybe a theory for it. I mean, they could be paying off some other debt obligations, right? So a debt obligation being they had another loan or they had to pay someone out. So in the first couple months, let's see, that's January, February, March. So in March, I mean, you're already outpacing 24 January. But at that point, you may not have enough cash because in 24, you posted only a $1.6 million in profit with just a little bit more with cash on hand. And you had a rough 24 compared to 23. So you may needed some liquidity being cash on hand to pay for things. That's what we would call liquidity. It might have been Chris Roberts told me, and he's like, dude, you want to re-up again because this shit's going to be big next year. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And because essentially, if we're talking about the same loan, there's a convertible option on that to turn it into shares, and the company pays the investor interest naturally on the accrual period, or what we would call like the tenor of that loan.
Now, the most interesting information about this specific loan that I found on here says the agreement of the loan facility described in this note was signed on December 25th of 2024. Signing a loan like that on Christmas is a choice. You think it was like a gift?
Yeah. So it could be covering like year-end liabilities.
Is that pretty normal for a company?
Yeah, this is all normal.
Be doing that?
Yeah, there's nothing crazy there.
And then there's another anomaly here that is kind of hard to ignore. CIG's marketing and publishing headcount for the year grew from 61 employees up to 139. It's hard to know what marketing and publishing counts as. Preparing for ship releases, putting out new game guides, creating bundle packs, putting together inside Star Citizen episodes, filming Star Citizen Live. All of these are technically marketing, but the staff count definitely went up in that department, and honestly, so did the funding. Say what you will, I think everybody recognizes that they're starting to provide more information around the things they're actually doing, even if it's not necessarily developmental information. But a lot of the conversation around this report so far has missed one thing. When I covered this on Space Tomato 2, I received comments talking like it had just happened. But it's important to remember that this is still financial information ending in 2024. 2025 was their best year ever, and they spent time fitting into a pattern of consistent content and ship delivery, and I think that has actually changed things. Crafting is now in the game, offering more progression and in-game rewards for time spent playing. The points of interest system that converts massive empty planets into spaces for hundreds of explorable points of interest is in internal testing. Server meshing has allowed for multiple star systems and an increased player count from 100 to over 700, with performance gains. The game director, CTO, and primary gameplay designers are all speaking more about the current or near future game as opposed to what might happen later. Between this financial report and the continued investment and acceleration in Star Citizen's development, it starts to become more clear why Star Citizen's biggest investors presumably haven't pulled out yet. 2025 was a lot of things. The year of playability, the year of stability, the year Wicklow rained hell down on Stanton. Take your pick. Likely the strongest driver of 2025 was Squadron 42 needing to be finished and polished. But I think 2025 was very much a proving ground to the investors, yes, but also to you. You are the most important part of Star Citizen. You can have a great game engine, intelligent devs, important patents, and limitless IPs, but that means nothing if there's no funding. Shout out to WB. Seriously, while there may be investors involved here, they were likely brought in at a time of need in 2018. At this point though, in 2026, it's going to be more important for CIG to prove people want to spend money on this game going forward than any actual 10 to 20 million pound loan would do. Until Star Citizen has storylines, interesting contracts across all game loops, characters to speak with, reliable progression, social features, game systems, and stability, it's still treading water. As we went over in the last video in the series, that's why Squadron 42 is so important. But if you haven't noticed, the last 18 months has been almost entirely dedicated to working on those specific things. While some of it's been rough, many players experienced the game without a multitude of glitches and game-breaking bugs for the first time last year. And it was clear that while most of the money was going to a different game, Star Citizen was kind of on the up and up. Even JV, a YouTuber who has struggled through Star Citizen once a year for at least the last 6 years, is starting to see things actually improve.
As much as this whole thing is like a scam, and I don't know like what it means for a game to be in development for over a decade and have, you know, raised so much money, and is it ever coming out, blah blah blah. I still like on some level I get the vision of it. I don't understand the execution, but I certainly get the vision.
And we're seeing the results of this. Numbers are up, positivity's going up, and money printers definitely going brrr. I and Skylark do think investors have an impact on how the development of Squadron 42 goes. But we think a lot of that decision is being made based on just how damn much it seems people want to see this through.
And in many ways, I would even say it's investor-led, but I'll spin it this way. It's investor-led by us, right? And we're now not shareholders.
Yeah.
Which,
they need
with some of the money that some of us has spent, we probably should be, but we are very much emotional shareholders, and I would say we push it along further than any financial pressure.
Yeah, I mean, that's where the bulk of the money comes from, and like we looked at, when the game gets better, more money comes in. Like last year had so much money. Yes, they pushed a bunch of ship sales, but let's be honest, more people felt like they could finally play.
Yeah, that's just, you make more money with a finished product. It's
and
just
with more people.
That's facts. Yeah, that's just
Holy
simple
crap.
facts.
But it's not all good, or at least it wasn't back in 2024. Like I said, that year, wages actually exceeded revenue. Margins were already tight, and they had to depend on a tax credit from the UK government to pull through in the green. That same year, the directors of the company took a 30% pay cut across the board to save money, likely in addition to reshuffling staff. These are smaller things to be aware of and trends to watch in the 2025 financial report when we cover it next year. Ultimately, this points to Squadron 42 being pretty crucial to the overall project, not because it's the moneymaker, but because of the reasons we covered in the last video. Star Citizen as a project is built on the promise of a game that can operate unlike others, a niche genre at a high budget with deep features, storytelling, a lot of detail, and a fully fledged MMO. That is not easy to make or to fund. It's crazy. But the continuously growing numbers for 13 years now, the occasional major tech milestones that they hit, and the marketing blitz that they put on keep that promise alive. If Squadron 42 bombs, it's going to drag all that down with it. Confidence from a lot of people is going to be lost, and thus the investors may also be. So if they know they're getting a good game this year, the investors won't pull out before September 30th. And if they did, well, we might not even know. At the end of the day, from what we can see, revenue is up, features are being delivered, Squadron 42 hasn't been publicly delayed, and there's no obvious sign investors have exercised their put to cash out on that £70 million. Does that mean Squadron 42 is going to release this year or be good? It kind of has to, doesn't it? Thank you for watching this video all the way through. If you'd like to hear from a VP of Finance who does this for a living, I'll leave the full interview with him, which has way more detail and discussion in it, linked down below. And if you want to learn more about the why and how around Star Citizen, I release new videos here every week and cover the daily news, ongoings, and what of Star Citizen on Space Tomato 2, also linked down below. Just a reminder, I'm not a financial professional. What I said in this video could be wrong, and I will likely be corrected in the comments. But I hope this gave you more insight and context into what's actually going on behind the scenes, and why the conversation is fairly nuanced. Thanks again for watching, I hope you learned something new in this video, and I'll catch you in the next.